And you can let in people when you're ready.
6 people waiting, or 11. Oh, yeah, 6.
All right, so I see we have Maya and Christina and Mary Diaz and Scott and Christine and Stephanie on so far. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I think we might wait one more minute to see if anyone else joins. And certainly this will be recorded and available later, so that's awesome. So you can view it again. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Sound Girls Ask the Experts panel. We're going to talk today about live broadcast. My name is Mary Mazurek, so I will be moderating this panel of experts who will happily share their knowledge about live broadcast with you because it's really, really fun. It's a really fun, most of the time, profession to be in. I first wanted to thank Carrie Keys, who's on a actual gig. So yay, gigs. And thank you to Jasmine Mills, who's helping us facilitate this, this webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. Yep, there's a wave from Jasmine. Okay. So as I was saying, I'm Mary Mazurek, and I do live broadcast. I specialize in classical music recording and broadcast, and I work for WFMT Radio in Chicago. So we're the classical station in Chicago. WFMT is pretty special because when we're in non-COVID times, we broadcast approximately 225 live music broadcasts a year, for which I'm responsible for most of them. And it's been really great. I've been working for the station for almost 28 years. But enough about me. I want to have our panelists introduce themselves and what they do. Could we start with you, Eileen?
Sure. Hi, and thank you for having me here today. I'm Eileen Della Hunty, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not an engineer. I am a producer and director, but I produce and direct all of our live broadcasts for New York Public Radio, and I've been doing it for 30 years. I've worked really closely with our engineering team. We're like this. We're partners in getting all of these broadcasts together. I also do, I lost count, but it's close to 100 a year, I think, between our on location live broadcasts and things that we do in the studio. And we also have a performance space, and I produce and direct all of the events in that performance space. I work mostly with WQXR, which is the classical station of New York Public Radio, but I've also done a lot of events with WNYC, and I've done some freelance work with Audible, and I have helped out in New Orleans on the Jazz and Heritage Festival. And lately I've been sort of loaned out to stations to help them do live broadcasts. So I've been mentoring quite a bit throughout the industry, and I hope to do more of that. I really enjoyed that. It was super fun to go to another station and meet people and help them put on some live broadcasts on the radio. So that's
Fantastic. Me. Fantastic. Thank you. And I'm going to ask our attendees to make sure they are on mute. during the panel, and please feel free to type questions in the chat. We'll get to them a little bit later. Mark, could you introduce yourself?
Well, hello, and yes, let me say thank you again for this opportunity to be here, be reunited with two friends and colleagues also, neither of whom have I seen in quite some time, so this is a lot of fun. My name is Mark Travis. I am the Director of Media Production for the New York Philharmonic and have been on the full-time staff with them for 10 years. Prior to that, I with Mary was at WFMT and the radio network in Chicago for a dozen years, and wrote and directed a lot of, and engineered a lot of broadcasts, largely with an eye towards syndication, but certainly lots of live events as well. In addition to my activities with the Phil, I also have been running my own little boutique production company since about 2002, where I service the needs of a lot of nonprofits and educational institutions with podcasts and broadcasts, and increasingly, of course, supporting a lot of video projects as well, and finding ways for video and audio to talk together and to be in the same room and play nice. You know, it's been a lot of fun to you know, this career's been good to me, you know, starting out as a voice major and being starting my career at Northern Public Radio as a full-time announcer, and just kind of going to the other side of the glass about 4 years into my career and never really looking back. So it's great to be here.
Thank you, Mark. And then we have Katya.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for this opportunity to be here. I am from Poland, Kraków, Poland, and I'm a PhD student, but also work in a radio, and I've been working in here for quite some time, considering for how long I have been studying, because I started on my second year of the studies in the local radio station. Then I moved to student radio station, and now I work in RMF Classic, which is a national Polish radio station, commercial one. And beside that, I also I have a little bit of experience in the recording studios and live gigs, very small ones in jazz clubs and stuff. So it is quite interesting for me that I carry out this sort of line where you have some sort of live interaction, and I find it very satisfying. And also a little bit about my PhD, I do it about perception within an immersive system, multi-channel systems, and ambisonics technology. And yeah, that's more or less it about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Katya. So this is wonderful. We have this wonderful group of panelists with this diverse knowledge. I think most people don't think about live radio as a career path, either as an engineer or a producer. So I was curious how all of you got started in this. Eileen, let's go back to you.
Well, let's see, 100 years ago. No, I got interested in radio early on. I think it was mostly because I wanted to be a musician because musicians were cool, but I was a terrible musician. So the next best thing, and I had a pretty big record collection, was to get involved with my high school had a radio station. And then I ended up doing an internship at the Boston rock station, WBCN, for those of you from Boston may have heard those call letters. I ended up doing internships there before and after college. I worked on the morning show. I did comedy pieces and production for that organization. It was fun. It was crazy. It was the 80s. I understood, though, that I really liked public radio, and I would listen to public radio all the time, and they'd make fun of me at the rock station that I sounded like a public radio person. So eventually I got a job in public radio. I moved to New York, and I worked on a show called Heat with John Hockenberry, which was one of the flagship shows, started in 1990, and it was to sort of, it was one of the first shows that used the satellite system in public radio. So we were based in New York. We used the WNYC studios, and it was a 2-hour live nightly arts and performance show, 5 days a week. It was on from 10 to midnight. And I would do a lot of the music booking. I would also do a lot of the cultural pieces. And eventually I became the director of the show. So I would do the live run of the show every night. And I really loved that. I just loved the live element. I loved working with the engineers and the host and just making sure everything was going smoothly. People always tell me I have grace under pressure. I hope that's true, because that was the 99% of my job, is to be able to react to a drop phone line or a drop, a CD that wouldn't play or something, and I could figure out how to handle it and what to do next. That show lost its funding, as shows do, and I ended up working with WNYC at that point, and I started working in their production department, and they did a lot of live broadcasts and a lot of cultural pieces, post-production on things, and I just did it all. And I've been doing that kind of work. I say that I never have 2 days that are the same. That's why I can stay in this organization as long as I have, because I show up and I have a new project. Like today, before I came on here, I'm working on a project with the Syrian clarinetist Kenan Azme for a program with Carnegie Hall. So we're doing a live stream on Thursday night. He was recorded in our green space a couple weeks ago, and I'm working with our host, whose name is John Schaefer, who some of you might know from his New Sounds program. And we'll be presenting him live, and we will play back the music that we've recorded. So that's typical of today. Tomorrow will be completely different. Tomorrow I will be working on a whole different show. So it's great, because I just, I'm constantly meeting new people, and I'm working with the best musicians in the world. So that's why I love my job. So that's how I got in and stayed in, I should say, too.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's very cool. And Mark, how did you get started in this?
Yeah, so I mean, I always wanted to be on the radio. I loved listening to the radio, and it was a part of my daily routine. I got to know WFMT and it, the other commercial classical station in the Chicago area, WNIB. They were kind of constant companions. Of course, I also really liked heavy metal, and I really liked sort of the house music scene, and a lot of other things too. So, just radio was a great way to have access to all those free sounds. So, I went to school on a full tuition scholarship for voice performance. And I guess I was about 21 years old when I happened to see an ad for the local NPR affiliate, looking for fill-in weekend announcers at the local classical station. And I thought, well, that sounds fun. And because of my voice training, I was able to kind of sail through some of the odd pronunciations that we have in classical music pretty well, and got called maybe within a week of applying for the job. And then that sort of set me on a path, I suppose, where pretty soon I was working also jazz shifts and news shifts for their sister station. Then I went across, literally across the river to do some work at a couple of the commercial stations, and even, babysitting board op feeds of baseball games. We were the local repeater for the Chicago White Sox. And so I was really fortunate enough that even though I was in my professional career, very young into my professional career, I got a wide variety of experiences in a very short period of time. By the age of 22, I already had 5 sets of call letters on my resume. And so, you know, after doing that and kind of trying to live the life of a performer with modest success, I suppose, I knew, you know, I just sort of looked at how radio and sound had been this constant companion. That was the thing that was paying the rent. You know, that was the money I could count on for the most part each month. And so I said, well, you know, why don't I try and get into a bigger market? And so in 1999, July of 1999, I applied for 2 jobs, and they were at my 2 favorite stations. One was at WFMT, one was at WMAQ, which was a news service. It was actually the oldest frequency in Chicago at that time. I got called for both jobs. The WMAQ job paid $2,000 a year more, but you know, you had to dress up and you had to park downtown. And so I thought, well, let's go do this classical thing. That was kind of it. And as you know, Mary, you know, I mean, WFMT was such an eclectic place. It too was a great place where there were lots of mentors. You know, I think at the time I thought, you know, Mary and I were kind of the start of the new blood, you know, but what I think I realized when I left there in 2011 was that I was more like the last of the old in a sense. And that wasn't a bad thing because really and truly I had great teachers, great mentors, a wide variety of opportunities, you know, and I'd actually gone there initially to be a production assistant for the TV side of things. But then word got out that I knew a few things about classical music, and before I knew it, you know, I was writing and directing, you know, well, at the end of it, over 800 syndicated broadcasts just for the network alone, and everything from spoken word to jazz. So yeah, I mean, there too, no 2 days are ever alike, and I love it. It's taken many different forms, but you know, at the end of the day, it's been about trying to engage audiences and you know, and to use the best practices and the best equipment and the best people, you know, towards that aim.
Great, thank you, Mark. Thanks for taking me down memory lane too, reminding me of a few things. And Katya, how did you get started in radio?
Yeah, so I was studying acoustic engineering in Krakow. And here we have this thing that you have to do an internship fairly early, so at the 2nd year of the studies. And usually you have to do it somewhere outside of the university. So I just went through the list, and I wasn't particularly aiming to do it in the radio station, but that was the chance. So I went to this local radio station, which was rather small. And there was a collective of people who worked there from different radio stations, and just sort of transferred from those radio stations and created a new local one. And so I stayed there, and I really liked in there the whole atmosphere and the fact that those people had so much experience and such various experience. So I, day by day, was starting to learn new things, a little bit of manual stuff like soldering, or somebody were seeing me and saying, oh, come on, help me out with this. I'll show you how to do it. And then I was repeating those stuff. And by repeating things over and over, I was gaining experience. And the general atmosphere in that place was really great. And the fact that I was sometimes allowed to do some bigger things, like to sit behind the desk and do the transmission while somebody was standing behind me, was like an adrenaline rush, and it was quite addictive. But the thing was, they didn't really allow me to do too much because I was really young and really inexperienced, and it was a radio station that was transmitting to some space that people were hearing. And so one day I got asked, why don't you try the student radio station, where you will have some more playground to mess things up without that much responsibility. And I felt at first like, that's a downgrade, really. But after thinking it over, I went to the student radio station, And this guy was really, really right. It was a huge, huge playground when I could basically implement my even the stupidest ideas, but just to see what is working and what definitely is not working. And it was different environment, but it was constantly the same thing that was driving me, sort of. And so basically the transition was fluid from this local to the student radio station. And when I was too old for the student radio station, I searched for something that would replace it. So this is how I started in here. And I do on-air transmission with usually with speakers from other cities. So this is like a lot of anticipation and a lot of things still can go wrong. But the previous experiences gave me a lot of confidence and a lot of repetitiveness of doing the same stuff over and over again. You get just the confidence with the gear, I think. And yeah, so that's how I ended up here and still going and not moving anywhere for now.
Fantastic, fantastic. I kind of always joke that I got into radio by accident. I got into audio by accident. I got into radio by accident. So I studied music in my undergrad, and I was clearly not a very good musician. And then my school had a degree, a fairly new degree at the time, called sound recording technology, and I had no idea what that was, but I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So there I was studying sound recording, and I had interned at Universal Recording in Chicago, which was one of the big three studios in Chicago, and it was awesome because I got, like Mark, you said you had interest in house music and metal at Universal. I got to assist sessions with house music producer Marshall Jefferson, and I got to set up for a Metallica session. It was awesome. And they were restoring Orson Welles' Othello when I was there, so I got to work with the Foley engineer, Lyrita de la Serna, on that, and it was great. But unfortunately, the studio closed when I was there, just so I'd only been there less than a year. And then I couldn't get any work in studios afterwards, and actually had one studio tell me we don't hire women engineers. Yeah, but then, you know, I had sent my resumes out to everybody, and then WFMT called me, and I got the glamorous position of being the occasional overnight board operator. So my shift was on Saturdays and Sundays from midnight till 8 in the morning. Just basically, I was the technological babysitter. But it was cool because I could pull tapes off the archives. I, you know, got to listen to Studs Terkel interviewing Bob Dylan and Aaron Copland and, you know, all kinds of people. So that made the time pass much more quickly. And then they found out that I knew something about recording and microphones and stuff. And they said, hey, my boss at the time was like, I do this live broadcast, the Dave Myra Hess concerts, every Wednesday afternoon. I don't want to do it anymore. You can do it. Okay. And I've been doing that ever since. So if you're around, tune in at 12:15 on Wednesday, Central Standard Time, to our stream on WFMT.com or on our Facebook page or YouTube channel, so you can tune into that. So that's how I got started. Okay. So before we go into some more of the meat of the job, I just wanted to check in with all of you. How are you all doing during this time? It's really unusual. It's something we haven't experienced, well, ever, with COVID. How are you doing? How are you keeping yourselves healthy and upbeat and all of that? Does anybody want to share any of that? Silence.
Sure, I'll go.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it was scary. I mean, I remember being at a recording session mid-March last year, and we were voice tracking. You know, the radio series of the New York Philharmonic is hosted by the actor Alec Baldwin, and so Alec was in studio with us. You know, he comes in studio about once a month to do his voiceover work under normal times, and we had a nice lunch, and Valery Gergiev was in town conducting the Philharmonic for the first time in probably about 10 years. And it just so happened that I was a good friend with Maestro Gergiev's kind of handler, I suppose you might say. And Alec really wanted to meet him. And, you know, we got the photo op of them kind of elbow bumping each other. And then I think it was the following night that the concert was canceled. And we just sort of thought that we would be home for a couple of weeks maybe until this whole thing blew over. But I wanted to make sure, you know, just given the special needs, you know, I was concerned, you know, what happens if we get locked out of the studio? You know, what can I do with my own at-home operation? What materials will I have access to? And so I took approximately 100 terabytes worth of material on various drives home with me. You know, I had a pretty good home setup, you know, again, because I do also run my own company, you know, so I wasn't so concerned about the technology. I was more concerned about the actual file assets and being able to have access to those. And, you know, within about a week, you know, our access to the building became very limited. And, you know, we just all of a sudden were on a work from home, and work from home kind of turned into work 24/7, you know, really and truly, especially for those first few weeks as we were kind of figuring out how is this all going to work. And, you know, similar, I'm having the same conversation then with some private clients, some of which, you know, pulled out immediately. And then oddly enough, gained some new ones because they were looking for people that could help problem solve, you know, and find ways to stay engaged with audiences. A lot of Boston-based clients, you know, became new to me during that time in particular. So it was, yeah, it was interesting. And it just, you know, I don't think it was until October before I was on set with a live crew again, you know, very distanced. And then, you know, you're dealing with everybody being a little on the rusty side, you know, just in terms of really all of the things that we hadn't had to think about. Everybody was in post-production mode and, you know, almost in that mindset of, we don't have to do this well, we can just edit it. And, you know, that's of course not the case, especially if you want to start getting to a point of streaming and broadcasting again. So I would say even over a year later, we're still sort of figuring out, but we are at the Phil, you know, figuring it out day by day. You know, we did finally just have our first live event with an audience at a huge venue called The Shed over in the Hudson Yards neighborhood. And we have plans for a couple of live streams coming up. One's going to be from Bryant Park in June. One's going to be a Memorial Day concert at St. John the Divine. And then we're kind of looking ahead to doing, you know, more of those, probably at least one a month, starting with the new season. So yeah, it's been peculiar. I mean, it's a good thing I like what I do because I've had an extra healthy dose of it, you know, and just kind of figuring out what works and doesn't work, I suppose. And that seems true of a lot of colleagues in similar roles, similar places. I remain very grateful that, you know, there was no gap in employment, you know, during that time.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, we've definitely all had to pivot during this. And Eileen, did you have something to share about how you've pivoted, how you've stayed well during this? How have you been coping, dealing with the whole COVID situation?
It was really tough at the beginning because we were trying to figure out sort of our responsibilities with some arts organizations around the city and how to help them. That was kind of the mission, is what were we going to do to support these organizations. I came up with this idea of doing a show called New York in Concert. And it was I reached out to institutions all over the city, big and small, and got recordings from them. And we produced a weekly show about just highlighting their performances and what they do and their missions, and talk to artists and composers. And the idea was to keep everybody thinking about live production or live concerts. Over the summer, we had worked with Lincoln Center. We took on a festival. So every summer, the Lincoln Center does the Mostly Mozart Festival. It's been an institution in New York City. Well, of course, they couldn't do it. So it became a radio festival. And it was an enormous amount of work. This is the amount of work that we've taken on. And I get it, because we want to support everyone, has been intense. I'm sure, Mark, you feel the same way. I've never worked as hard as I've worked in this past year. I pivoted. We had an artist in residence who was supposed to be using our studios and doing a series of 3 shows. This is Jeremy Dank, a pianist, and we ended up having him up in his barn in Westchester and working with him. It was also a video project. So to get him, he's not an engineer, and we weren't at the point where we could send anybody, to get him to figure out how to record himself decently, and also to videotape himself. So we're training everyone to be audio engineers and video producers. So that was a big thing. I also did this huge project with the conductor Marin Alsop for Beethoven, to celebrate his 250th birthday. And I did a series of programs with her called Quest for Joy. And I'm very forgiving of home recordings this year. I've, let all my standards drop. But Marin had a pretty good setup in her home, and we practiced, and she sent me some samples of what it sounding great. So she did all these interviews with musicians and biographers, and one whole session she didn't record after we were done. So I had to go with the Zoom recording, and had some people help me try to make it sound as good as it can. And then it's a lot of making lemonade out of lemons, and the programs were fine, and anything that sounded really awful, I had her just record some lines. So right now, and the other big project that I've had to transition is my series that I do with Carnegie Hall. We do a series of live broadcasts every year. We do 13 shows. Well, we used to work with FMT on them. We do them locally first, and then I post-produce them for national broadcast. Because we haven't been able to do anything at Carnegie this past year, but we want to keep the season going, I'm doing a best of, or highlights, because we have 10 years. And so I had to look through and listen to lots and lots and lots of concerts and figure out 13 2-hour programs, and sort of puzzle those pieces together. So that's another, just a huge project I've been working on. Physically, I've been good. I'm trying to stay healthy. I am very grateful for having a backyard. That's been a huge plus this year. And I'm double vaxxed, so life is good.
Excellent, excellent. Katya, how has COVID kind of changed your work, and how are you staying healthy during all of this?
Yeah, so on a smaller scale here, I also was very lucky to be working still, because many of my friends didn't really get this chance throughout whole year, and that was really depressing. Me personally, because I am the last piece of chain in the transmission chain. I got plentiful of work during that time, because most of the people, reporters, journalists, were asked to work from home, pre-record everything. So it got suddenly significantly less exhilarating and satisfying, but I was very grateful that I could still be here and work. So what they did here, they set up a tiny little studios in every house almost, very amateur. Some people got upgrades over the time. So basically they can stream now from homes, but everybody's very happy if they can go back to the studio and almost like overjoyed to see me through the screen. I've been doing a lot of post-producing work, and also what Eileen mentioned about the quality drops was quite depressing, because something that was absolutely not meant to go on air ever suddenly became almost a standard. So that has changed. And about also the amount of work, it was unfortunate because our radio station is transmitting mostly classical and film music. We had quite a lot of deaths this year, and this is some sort of emergency that I'm always being asked to come and help on the board. So that was very depressing. I had a job, but it was connected to sad events usually. So to stay healthy, I have this another lucky thing that this radio station is based in the middle of the woods in a little mount. So I was, during the lockdown, I had this permission to go out to work. So I cycled here and I upgraded my condition. I stayed fit, and that was helpful. But still it was super tough, because this is a very, very social type of job. And I miss my coworkers so much. There's open space, which is empty. I only hear the voices. I almost forgot the faces now. So almost like an audience now. So I can't wait to reunite with them soon, hopefully. But I also got first job, hoping for the best.
Yeah, that's all we can do. And I mean, we're spread out across the world, and yet I just hear a lot of commonalities between like how you've had to pivot and workflows, and a lot of commonalities of how my workflow has changed. Because my last day at WFMT before lockdown was March 9th of last year, which was my 50th birthday. And I did a live broadcast with a cellist and a pianist, and one piece with violin and cello. And that was it. And like you, Mark, I just had this, something's up, let me take my hard drive home. And I'm really glad I did, because 2 days later we were in lockdown. And like you, Eileen, we were, instead of broadcasting anything live, I was post-producing past shows for that time slot. Plus, we had also put together little recording kits and video and stuff. So we would send those out with musicians so they could record at home and with various rates of success. And then they would come to me and like, can you help clean this up? So I get out the isotope and try to clean things up as best as I can and send it out. I did actually go on a couple of remotes early on. One was to Jorge Federico Osorio's house, pianist, Mexican pianist. So I drove out to the suburbs with this kit and set up in his little studio space where he had his pianos, and set up and pushed the record button on the video and the audio, and went and sat in his living room until he was finished. And then collected it all and took it back and post-produced it for web and for radio. And then we're still not welcoming guests into the building, so we're not doing any live music from our studios, but I'm starting to go on more remotes, and do that. So I'm happy about that. I get to work with live musicians again, but I'm hoping for some more. So could you tell me a little bit more about the projects you've been working on, and if you have anything to share with us, that would be great. Eileen, let's start with you. Let's talk about like some of your current projects, and if you have a clip or two to share, we'd love that.
I have a little bit of a slideshow that I put together that I could show you. This is not COVID work. This is pre-COVID work. I think I can share. Hang on one second. Let's see. Can you all see that? Does that work? Yay! I'm famous for not having my screen share work. So this is our big project that we do. I mentioned that we do these live broadcasts from Carnegie Hall, and we do them locally. We used to do them nationally, but we're starting to do them locally. I think about 3 or 4 years ago. So, and then we package them and I send them out as a series, 13 of them nationally. So you can see here our microphone setup in Carnegie Hall. I hope you can see it if the picture is big enough. This is the Stern Auditorium. Actually, Carnegie has 3 halls. People don't always know that, but this is the big one, the famous one that everybody knows. Our engineers get prepared for these broadcasts by getting one of these, the stage plots that get sent to us. I think this is the Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra. So this is typical of our guide of how we'll set up and where the microphones will be. Again, I'm not the engineer, but I'll get a lot of this information in advance for the team. And they'll figure out, you know, what depending on the piece, who's going to need some extra help with a microphone, but it's a lot of mics that are flown in the front. And of course, we always have audience mics set up at Carnegie. And these are a couple of the engineers that I work with. This is, if you want to talk about badass women engineers, Noriko Okabe is at the top of my list. She's unbelievable. And she's she's a great engineer and a wonderful person. She's a freelancer. She's not on staff with us, but we steal her as much as we can because she's so good. She's got great ears. She's a musician herself. So she often does our music mixes. We actually rotate who's getting to do the music mixes and who does the broadcast mixes. This is the recording studio at Carnegie where we set up our team here. So George Wellington is one of our engineers, and thankfully he's also a musician. So he'll often sit with a score and cue the music mix engineer what's coming up and what to listen for. This is another one of Carnegie's halls. This is Zankel. This is the sort of the mid-size hall at Carnegie. And this is a recording we did with the Takács Quartet, but they're Hungarian, but they have a couple of extra people on this recording. You can see the stereo mic above the stage and then some accent mics on the stage. And then this again is the broadcast booth that we set up, and you can see the monitors. So this is for Stern Auditorium. We have a conductor cam. So we have our announcers can see that. I'll show you a picture where we set up the announcers, but they can see when they're about to start. And then the engineers have these, they're not that big, but they can kind of see what's going on stage. This is the broadcast mix. As you see, everyone's labeled there. This is when we had Fred Child as our host. We have a mic for him, a mic for Jeff, who's our host, and a couple guest mics. And then you'll see CD1 and CD2. I am old school. I like to do my playbacks of interviews on CD. And the reason is they try to get me to switch over to an SD card. I had more failures with an SD card than I ever had with CD. So they still bring out the CD player for me. So what happens is a typical day of a broadcast is in the afternoon, the orchestra will do a rehearsal, and that works as our sound check. And usually around that same time, I will get an interview with the conductor or composer or soloist in the Carnegie Hall recording booth. I will grab that interview, cut it up very quickly and write around it and put it on some form of playout, whether it's CD or the SD is my backup. So that's all done up at Carnegie. This is another, just a sense of what we're doing. I think this is the quartet. So this is a smaller mixing board. You can see the audience mics and the main omnis there. I think this is Noriko. She loves to doodle on these, on the tape that ends up on the mixing boards. So you see her little smiley face under and she even put the accent mark under Takash. She's awesome. This is a little bit bigger setup. This is, I'm trying to remember what year this was. We had a Osvaldo Gallihoff piece that was insane. Full orchestra, choir, playback, and I just could not believe the amount of equipment that we brought. WQXR and WNYC does not have a remote truck. So anytime we do a remote at Carnegie or anywhere across the city, we lug all of the equipment. So all of the mixing boards, all of the mics, sometimes music stands, all the playback equipment, the broadcast equipment, everything is brought up on elevators and schlepped, and we're all getting old, and I don't know why we still do this and why we don't have a remote truck. But this is another shot of this craziness that we do here. It takes hours and hours to set up, and everything works. I never worry that, you know, things aren't going to happen, because we've never had a technical fail on a broadcast, which is pretty remarkable considering how many we do. In Carnegie, I love this. This is a setup that we have for the hosts. We are set up backstage. It would be stage right. As the musicians come off the stage, they walk right past our host. This is Jeff Spurgeon in the background, and John Schaefer is in the foreground. So we set up the mics there for a couple of reasons. One of them is it's amazing ambience. You really, that's the thing of live broadcast. You want to bring people to the concert hall. Yes, you can listen to a beautifully pristine commercial recording, but nothing beats feeling like you're sitting in Carnegie Hall. You can hear people warming up backstage. You can hear musicians chatting in a different language. And some really wonderful things have happened off mic that we have picked up on the radio. This picture comes from an opening night concert. I think it was 2017. It was the Philadelphia Orchestra with Yannick Nezet-Sigan, whose name I love to say. This was a concert where they did Rhapsody in Blue, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. And you'll see that's Chick Corea, who passed last year. He's in the foreground, and then Long Long is in the background. We were waiting. They were both playing a piano. So there were two pianos on stage, and they were waiting for the stage crew to bring out the two pianos and arrange them. And our hosts were just going back and forth and yammering. And we were going to talk to Long Long post-concert, but they heard us. They went over to the microphones and just started talking. And it's one of the best piece of tape that I think we've gotten at Carnegie Hall. It was very spontaneous. They were in a great mood. They just were thoroughly enjoying the moment, thoroughly enjoying each other's company. And Yannick was there too. He came up to the microphone as well. So it was an opportunity for us to capture the liveness of Carnegie Hall. We had a really fun broadcast with Mitsuko Uchido, the pianist. She was performing, who was it that time? I think Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra. She had done this beautiful concerto, getting lots of bows. Our announcers were announcing her coming on and off stage. And she looked at our announcer, she said, "I'm going to do an encore. I'm going to do Bach." And she said that on the radio and then walked out. So our radio audience could hear that what her encore was going to be. So it was, I love this. This was something that we came up with about 2 years into doing this project, and it's been really successful. And the hosts just love what they're able to do backstage. I'm frozen here. Okay, another location that we worked at is, if you've been to New York and you've been to the Met Museum, this is the Temple of Dendor. So we've done orchestra recordings here, or chamber recordings. A little bit, tough to get a good sound. I would say it's a little bit of a boomy room, but our engineers have always been able to figure out how to best record in difficult situations. This is another broadcast that we did. This was a 12-hour, not live on the radio, but live on the web. This was a 12-hour Bach organ marathon. This was for Bach stock, we were calling it. You say, who would come to a marathon of a Bach organ concert? This thing sold out. We sold it in 2-hour increments, and we were turning people away at the door. New Yorkers are crazy. They love their organ. So that was another location that we were at. This is another challenging location. This is down at the World Trade Center, and now my brain is Brookfield Place. That's the name of it. It's a big, huge space, and people come for live concerts. They're free. Often there's a movie. It's sometimes just a score. We do this for one of our shows called New Sounds. And I always tell people, don't go to the concert, listen to it on the radio, because it's going to sound a lot better. It's not a great place to see a concert, but we make it sound good. We also, I mentioned that we have a live performance space. It's called the Green Space, and I produce 26 shows a year when we're not in COVID. So we bring in the stages, it can only hold so many people, although I've had several choirs on that stage. This was from a Christmas broadcast. This was the last Christmas broadcast before COVID. It was a 2-hour live show. I had 12 ensembles. So it was, they play for 8 minutes, do a quick stage change, bring out the next people. And it was just, rolling them in and out on stage. And I work really closely with the engineers to make sure that the stage changes work as well as they can, and try to anticipate how we're going to move mics on stage, and who's going to need, and also instruments, and who's going to need what. And again, I love doing the live broadcasts also because I can put my hosts in crazy sweaters. So this is what I did for them. Got to put ugly sweaters on my host for the live broadcast. We also, this is the control room at the Green Space. So I'll sit with the recording engineer, and we'll talk through what's going to happen, and I'll give them as much information as I can before we go into a live broadcast situation. We also do a lot of outdoor live broadcast. This is from Caramore. It's in upstate New York. It's about an hour and change outside of New York City. And the Orchestra of St. Luke's is there. This is not the Orchestra of St. Luke's, but this is their home for the summer. So during the summer, we do a series of outdoor concerts. This is one of the places we go. And this is our setup at Caramore. You can see, again, crazy amount of gear. All the mixing boards, but it's also sending the signals back to the station. On the left is it's kind of cut off, but that's my director spot. So I can talk to the hosts, I can talk to a stage manager, so they can tell me what's going on stage. My playback is there. And then I just think that this is insane, but you should see this. This is this is typical of a live broadcast. This is another outdoor concert that we do. This is the Naumburg Orchestral Concerts there in Central Park in New York. We usually do about 5 of these over the course of a summer. They have chamber orchestras, and we set up on the side of the stage and do the live broadcast from there. This is the setup. That's me and the engineers. Again, schlepping all the equipment. I've had to tear this down very quickly in the rain. There was one super rainstorm that came, and the equipment had to air out in our green space for about a week so it could dry. A little challenging. And then this is my favorite picture of me at an event. I am wearing 2 headphones, one so I can hear the broadcast mix, and the other so that I can talk to my stage manager and my host.
So I think you answered one of the pre-submitted questions, is like, how do you monitor audio of the broadcast plus talk to your crew? And I think we know the answer now.
Yes, I look insane, but this
I don that look as well.
You don that look. It's a crazy. So that's the last picture of my slideshow there.
Oh man,
a little sneak peek into the world of live broadcast from New York Public Radio.
I love the Studer mixers. We got a comment on the Studer mixers as well. FMT used to have a Studer mixer. I have no idea what happened to it, so I'm happy you were able to retain all of yours.
Oh, we're so old school. I mean, you'd think in New York Public Radio we'd be, doing all kinds of fancy things.
Those are great mixers,
they work. And like I said, I can't remember a time where we didn't get a broadcast up.
Awesome.
Because of a tech failure.
Awesome. And Mark, what are you working on during COVID?
Wow. So a lot of things. One of the first calls I got, not necessarily knowing, of course, none of us knew, is the Philharmonic going to survive throughout this whole thing? But one of the first calls I got was from a woman named Nadia Sirota, who is a broadcaster and podcaster, and a violist, and very much, on the cutting edge of the new music scene. And she and I had actually finally had this opportunity to work together and had put a podcast together, had a blast doing it. And so she called and said, I don't know what you're doing, but I have this crazy idea. Let's do an internet TV show. And I'd love for you to be my technical director, and I have no money, but, we'll try and at least cover expenses, we'll do what we can, we'll fundraise what we can. And so sure enough, we just sort of hurtled out of the box. First episode launched March 31st, I think. And for 13 weeks, 26 episodes, we did this labor of love where we would have on average 2 to 3 guests per week. We would broadcast via Facebook Premiere. Initially, we thought about trying to do it live, but we did settle on, just with all the at-home technology, that maybe the safer bet was to do it like live. And so still, put it on Facebook Premiere and then eventually also YouTube Premiere. But, it was very simple and kind of, put together with the digital equivalent of duct tape. But, we got really interesting people to be a part of it. Nadia has floated in some really fun circles. And so, we had excuses to show the San Francisco Symphony with Metallica, as part of this show. And, we had a couple of members of Medeski, Martin, and Wood as our guests, because Nadia had played a concert with them at some point in time. But then also, people like Conrad Tao, who's so versatile, both as a composer and as a wonderful pianist. Practically a neighbor up here, along with George Wellington, a neighbor up here in the Inwood, Washington Heights area of New York. So that was a lot of fun. And then, there were also some colleagues from some other organizations who said, we got to figure out video from home. Can you help us craft a best practices guide? And so I said, sure, I would love to. And worked a lot with the Handel and Haydn Society in particular. The general director there had been a colleague of mine at the New York Philharmonic, and next thing I knew, I was just doing audio support, and then eventually I was actually editing together the video elements for a lot of from-home videos for them. Then, kind of one thing leads to another. Carnegie has also been, a good client. I work a lot with the New York Youth, or with the National Youth Orchestra. and have supported their projects for the last couple of years, usually as a sound designer, but also some things in Zankel Hall as well. And so there was a cello tribute that came out, with Mishka Maisky and a number of other of the greatest cellists of our time, to do the Bachianas Brasileiras #5 and figuring out how to balance all these from home recordings and, work with Habib Azar, who's kind of like the it director in multi-camera, classical broadcasts. He's a wonderful person to work with because, he's got this composition degree from Carnegie Mellon, but he's also got like 8 Emmy Awards as a live director, primarily of soap operas, but, has really found this niche in working with organizations like the Philharmonic and Boston Symphony and others. And so, I'm lucky to call him both a friend and colleague. And then on the Philharmonic side of things, of course, we did a number of from-home videos with them. And then starting in the fall, we started doing some in-person, mostly small ensemble things at Merkin Concert Hall, which is a small concert hall just down the street from Lincoln Center proper. We did some things with the Manhattan School of Music, which had actually adopted a lot of really good safety protocols, difficult sight lines to work with. But then, as time went on, we did this big outdoor holiday brass special at Montclair State University, just across the border in New Jersey, where we were in this outdoor amphitheater and kind of figuring out how to balance brass that were distanced 20 feet apart from each other. Which not only was like something to figure out from an audio standpoint, but also from a visual standpoint. Usually 3 or 4 cameras, you can get a lot of coverage of a section, but this was like nothing else. So now we're kind of getting a little bit back to normal, where we're in, more traditional concert spaces. We did a few things from some cathedrals, but have now, started to land in Alice Tully Hall, which is, a fairly good-sized concert hall that's directly across the street from David Geffen Hall, where the Philharmonic performs. So it's been something. I'll see if I can share just a handful of photos from both, just the recent pre-COVID. Can we all see that? Yeah, okay. So this is actually, it's funny. So Eileen talks about the stacks of gear. I have found that I have had to go the opposite direction, particularly during COVID, but even was starting to gear myself, put myself in that direction. So you see here is a very simple Zoom mixer, and I would say it's probably the best like $700 I ever spent. In fact, actually that little USB preamp is probably more expensive than the actual board itself, but it gives you that tactile experience of having faders, but records to a hard disk. Believe it or not, that thing will do 2496, and it's been kind of a blessing to sort of work with something that that just is about the size of a laptop case, and be able to navigate that around. This was a little shoot that we did for a quick thing up at Bard College. This is actually in normal times my studio at the New York Philharmonic. You can see it's New York real estate being what it is. It's kind of a mess, but you'll see a little X32 mixer there that travels with me. That's the board I use primarily for supporting video projects. Limited in some respects, but actually a good versatile kind of plug and play board. This is that same board in Zankel Hall at Carnegie, one of the spaces Eileen was showing us, where I was supporting a project for Ensemble Connect, kind of a new music ensemble. You can kind of see where we were hanging some mic positions and had to be all dark. This is a mic setup of another of my regular clients down in Naples, Florida. I was in the process, I only got halfway through recording the entire Beethoven cycle on a Fazioli F308, one of the most beautiful sought-after pianos in the world. And unfortunately, we had to stop short. We only got, partway through through that. My Zoom calls got very interesting, during COVID. You see that there's Alec Baldwin, there's Yo-Yo Ma. It wasn't, we like to joke that inside our bedroom, we had a wide variety of artists over the course of time. Actually, my first concert or my first capture outside was at Daniil Trifonov's house in up in Connecticut, and just a single camera operator and myself. He actually happens to also have a smaller Fazioli, which was mercifully in tape. This is that outside concert at Montclair State I mentioned, where you can just get a sense of how spread out everybody was, and talk about a challenge to try and mix something together. Then smaller, more boutique type things. This has become more of the reality of my day-to-day life. This was a shoot we did at a concert hall with the full ensemble of the Phil, and where I was actually having to step in as switch operator and director as well, so you kind of see the various camera positions, working with our audio director. And similar in the aforementioned Merkin Hall. So, and then this was our most recent. You can see it, the good old trusty, reliable Yamaha DM2000, which finds its way all over. For a long time, that was our house board at the Phil, but is also the house board at Tully. And this was kind of this is the closest we've come to being back to normal in recent times. And then something sort of smaller scale with the violinist Augustin Hadalek. So, again, it's been... Thankfully, it's all just kind of kept on, from, just right prior to COVID to then, coming out of COVID, and then lots of those little Zoom box looking videos in between, probably 40 of those.
Awesome. And we have a question from Julia. What was the name of the first board you showed? Was that the Zoom?
Yeah, it's a Zoom L12, and there's also a Zoom L20, which is a little bit bigger. And yeah, super lightweight, will record direct to disc. You can use it as an interface, but if you use it as an interface, you're limited to 48K. But if you can trust the SD cards, you can do a full tracked out pre or post fader 2496 mix.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And Katya, you're actually in the studio right now. Could you give us a little peek?
Yeah, of course I can. It won't be this extreme as I just saw, and I'm a bit mind blown by what I saw. But this is where I work. So this is cloud board, and it's digital board, and this is a little. I don't know if you can see, but there is a monitor, a camera for different cities, which I communicate with my co-workers, with the speakers. And this is the intercom, which I use to communicate with different studios, because I am basically settled at the end of the long building. And there's a lot of studios, and we are all connected, and we can all communicate with each other. And there was a question somewhere, somebody asked in this enter question, how to keep focus on when you get to speak to many sources or listen to many sources at once. And the picture that Eileen showed with two headphones at the same time. So I found this question really interesting, because this is a skill. It might be a talent, but this is the skill that you can learn actually. It's really fun once you get this multitasking in work. But as you could see, it's a tiny studio, and everything is under the reach of your hand. So it's pretty doable to control it. And as for the projects, I don't really have anything like those big things going on, and not much has changed for us in this matter. The only thing is the lack of the usual big events that we are kind of patrons, sponsors. So one of the biggest ones is FMF, so the Film Music Festival, that doesn't didn't take place the last year, and this year it's postponed and it will be much smaller. And I really, really regret that fact, because it's usually so much fun, and there are huge arenas filled with people coming to listen to the whole soundtracks, playing live with orchestras, and we stream it. And also there are some other a little bit smaller events, such as awards handling that we hand into different people, different talented people, musicians or young talents, and so on and so forth and so forth. So that was moved for the remote version. And me personally, nothing much has changed. I'm just sitting here as I was sitting here, and privately I keep digging into the spatial audio and trying to finish my PhD, which is not really that easy nowadays, as I don't get to go to the conferences, and obviously there's not that much motivation from outside, so it's a little bit tricky, but I try to keep going.
Okay, great. That was great to have a look into your personal broadcast worlds and see how
Thank you.
things work. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you all. I have a tiny clip of something I would like to share, which was from yesterday, actually. So, Eileen, you talked about partnering with other organizations. So we at WFMT have partnered with the Music Institute of Chicago. They're doing a live stream every Sunday. And this was one of yesterday's. So I did the audio for the live stream and then also recorded it. We'll air it on WFMT next month in the time slot for Live from WFMT. So give me just one moment and see if I can share this. Okay, can you see my screen? Nichols Concert Hall. Okay, let's see if we can hear. So this is Third Coast Percussion. So they're a Grammy award-winning ensemble, and they came to Nichols Concert Hall yesterday, and I think I had 24 inputs that I was mixing live to live stream and also to stereo recording, which we'll broadcast later. So let's see if this works.
I love them. I've worked with them
They
too.
are great. They are
They're awesome.
so fun. Yeah, but it was, it was a quite a bit of setup. Fortunately, the Music Institute of Chicago has a 24-channel Mackie mixer that they allowed me to use. So I was actually in there Thursday for another recording for another program we do. at WFMT called Introductions. So while I was there, I tested all of their lines just to make sure I had, 20, I think it was 22 inputs, 22 good channels, 22 good lines, and brought the microphones with me. So it wasn't quite as big a pack as I would need to do if I had to bring everything myself. And then that worked out really well. All right.
I tell people that this is no lie, I reduce my fee based on my ability to use another organization's stands and cables alone. Because really and truly, like the mixer and the microphones, that's not such a big deal, but do not discount, being able to use somebody else's stands.
That's
and
a
cabling.
good idea, because I'm in my 50s, and dragging
I'm not far
stuff
behind you.
Yeah, dragging stuff around with me is not so fun anymore, especially if it's only me. So that's a good idea. Let's get to some questions. Okay, so let's start with the pre-submitted questions. Okay, so have you ever had to work with like a front of house engineer and take splits from the front of house, and how did you do that? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, quite a lot. Usually, it happens in a few different contexts, and how we handle it. It just depends on the individual circumstance. A lot of times, that house sound, if there are going to be speeches or some sort of talking in the process, then that's something that we will usually take, and usually it'll just be in the form of a simple mult that'll just come back to us. Every once in a while, there will be sound reinforcement that's necessary, because let's say that there's a chorus or that there's a peculiar electronic instrument, Owen Martineau is one that comes to mind. There's a big Messiaen symphony that has a part for it called the Turangalila Symphony, and that's something where at times, say at the Philharmonic, we will be responsible for kind of the orchestra mix, but that we will bring in another company, usually this outfit called Sound Associates, to come in and do front of house sound. And there, it can sometimes be a much more complicated pre-mix that will then have to come back to us. And we'll dedicate sometimes a separate auxiliary mixer, but often just extra channels to be able to then work that into our feed, so that we have that independent of kind of what the core audio is, but also that we can replicate, what the audience experiences. But yeah, it happens quite a bit. I would say, particularly for those two types of things, either, sound reinforcement within, the group because of the ensemble, but also a lot, if there are dignitaries and other people that are speaking or emceeing, you want to be able to get that nice and clear, usually through their house system, wherever that is.
Anybody else want to add anything to that? I actually had that situation yesterday. We weren't reinforcing it to an audience. There was no actual in-person audience, but there was one track that had playback, pre-recorded playback. So part of that playback was going to the ensemble's in-ear wireless system, and then I was taking a split of it to mix it with the live instrumentation. I've also had situations where I've worked with the Grant Park Symphony, which is sound reinforced because it's outside, so I will take a split from the front of house mixer because it's not practical to double mic everything, so I'll just take a split from that and mix it for my needs for radio, and they will mix for their needs for the house sound, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other one too is just like for dailies. We at the Phil, we're doing these outdoor concerts over the summer, just these little pop-up things that we called Bandwagon. It was literally just a pickup truck that went around, and we'd have 4 or 5 musicians, and of course, led by this countertenor, and there was the stuff that we were doing for future proofing, but then the reality was, we had to have a press clip go right away, and same thing, just a little auxiliary stereo mix, of kind of the intercom, house system, to be able to just have that to hand off.
Cool. All right. And I wanted to ask another pre-submitted question. And those of you who are actually on the Zoom call, if you want to type in questions, please feel free. But the pre-submitted question was, what kind of study do you recommend or certifications do you recommend for someone who wants to get into this line of work?
When I think about our broadcast engineers, none of them went to a recording school. They all learned at the radio station. They all got involved. Like I was talking about George Wellington. He was a bassist, and he went to music school, and he ended up getting involved in a radio station and then learning from there. Ed Haber, who's our chief engineering. He's famous in the broadcast system in public radio because he's been doing this for 40 years and he's just an amazing engineer. I think he has a history degree from Brandeis. Again, I think a lot of it is boots on the ground and getting in with the right people and getting good mentors. Our team is really great at mentoring up and coming engineers or people that want to be engineers. I'm trying to think if there's anyone like Noriko, who I mentioned, also has a music degree. Yeah, I have a communications degree. I'm probably the closest to broadcast school of anybody in our core team. But I'm not an engineer. It really is about mentoring with a seasoned engineer and somebody who's willing to, share all their knowledge and just being there and learning on the fly and learning, different situations. Every time we go out, I feel like we're going to learn something new, all of us, about a recording situation.
Cool. And Katya, did you have, what was your experience coming up in radio?
Yeah, I absolutely agree about the experience. I personally don't really have any sort of certifications, but I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just I'm not really, I wasn't in the situation where I was asked for any sort of certification, but definitely experience and watching people do things and being as much as you can, basically just attend different gigs or watch, assist or whatever. But as for the degree, in my radio where I work with classical music and film music, so I sometimes need to work with some sort of musical elements to what I do. So I have finished primary music school, and that is very useful. But my colleagues, and I also have this acoustic engineering master degree, but my colleagues who work on the other side of the building, they don't have any of musical education, or they don't have engineering title, or maybe they do, but not connected to any sort of sound audio engineering, and they're brilliant engineers. So I would absolutely agree that it's just the practice and the will to become something, whatever that is.
Great, thank you. I'm wondering if there's any questions from the people who are on Zoom Live. Does anybody want to come off mute and turn on their camera? Okay, well, we'll go to another pre-submitted question then. I have a question about like the type of EQ compression processing that is used when you mix for live broadcast. Would anybody like to share what they do in that situation?
I mean, specifically in live, not much usually, just because I'm concerned about interrupting the signal chain, particularly having started in kind of the old days of ISDN radio broadcasts, which could be unreliable at best sometimes when trying to send a long stream over some distance. We kind of tried to stay out of the way of it as much as possible. For post-production, of course, I do very much love the isotope line of products. Synaptech has come in handy, particularly for some of my more experimental works. Like I worked with a celebrity psychic who and did a podcast series for her, so we needed lots of ethereal type things, and so I loved some of the kind of fun multi-verb things available through Synaptech, but also from a cleanup standpoint, trying to deverb and what have you. The expensive tools, but really, really effective. But I love Ozone Nectar. I love Ozone and Nectar. From the isotope line, of course, the RX series for noise reduction is, I think, now industry standard. But in terms of going out, if anything, I would use the onboard, maybe just a little bit of onboard compression, usually built into the board itself, and that really just on a case-by-case basis. But more often than not, trying to select microphones in a general sound design where you don't have to do a whole lot of that. You sort of assume that the signal is just going to be compressed by the very nature of the fact that it's leaving our mixer.
Great. Any other approaches to processing, EQ, anything like that? Yeah, I would agree with Mark. There's generally not a lot of time to set up. I spend most of my time placing microphones. The only thing yesterday I could have probably used is just a bit of limiting on the 2-mix bus, which I did not have, so I had to kind of do it manually with the percussion group. But other than that, I like to use the actual space, the sound of the space, whenever possible. On a rare occasion, I may high pass filter something. I might bring an outboard reverb with me, but generally it's pretty sparse.
Yeah, a classic softening just at the ready, but that would be what I would punch in just to the console on a as needed basis, especially if I was really concerned with real extremes of the dynamic. But yeah, not much more than that.
Great. All right. Well, I want to respect all of our time, especially our panelists who have given us so much knowledge. I want to finish with one question that was pre-submitted. And that is, what is your favorite thing about doing live broadcasts? Eileen, let's start with you.
It's thrilling, and I think that there's an energy there it's unique to live broadcasts. And again, I'd said this before, but I love being able to work with the best musicians in the world, and getting to present them in the best way possible on the radio and bring their work to a larger audience. So that's the best thing about live broadcasts for me.
Excellent. Mark, what is your favorite thing about live broadcast?
Yeah, it's that same thing. It's that intangible that everyone's aware that it's something special, that there's just a sense of occasion about it. And so as a result, I mean, even though everybody is expected to, especially in a major market like New York, or Chicago, to perform at a high level, there's just something about knowing that you don't have that safety net. That is, as Eileen puts it, it's just thrilling. There's nothing else like it. And just that satisfaction of knowing, being able to push something just a little bit, and just having that perfectly well-timed sequence, and knowing that you haven't interrupted the downbeat, it's just great, and knowing that you've ended on time and, haven't caused there to be union overages, that's also satisfying as well. So nothing quite like it.
Thank you, Mark. Katya, what's your favorite thing about live
Yeah,
broadcast?
absolutely agreed, and it's so addictive. And also, I would add to it, there's some sort of relationship that you create with your artist or speaker or performer, that you make that person trust you and be comfortable. And this is so rewarding, and that you work in a shadow, but your sort of work, when done well, is very important and seeable. Like, they know you're doing a good job as they feel good with you. So that's really rewarding.
All right, thank you. And I would agree with all of you. And also, it just feels like I'm making a connection with people all around the world. When I'm able to send out a live broadcast, it's just extremely thrilling and, just so much fun to do. Well, I think we are about at our time, and I wanted to thank all of our panelists, Eileen, Mark, Katya, for joining us. This was wonderful. Thank you for those of you who are on live with us. It was wonderful having you. Thank you so much to Carrie Keys and Sound Girls for hosting us. Thank you to Jasmine Mills for helping us facilitate the technical stuff today. Make sure you go to Sound Girls' website to find out what's coming up next on Ask the Experts. And remember, Sound Girls offers things like mentoring and just a wealth of knowledge. So just make sure you check in with the Sound Girls website and Facebook page often. So I wanted to thank you all so much.
Thank
Have a
you,
great
Mary,
day.
Thank you.
for wonderful moderation.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Great to
All
see you.
right, thank you all.